Ready?
I just realized something.
I just started.
That entire time we were recording, I had my headphones in the wrong audio jack and didn't even acknowledge it.
Oh, yeah, you... Welcome to Rhythm and Pixels, a video game music podcast, episode World 23, actual episode 4. So 23-4. I think it's 227, I think. I'll have to look again. Anyway, this is a video game music podcast. My name is Rob Nichols.
And I am horrible with audio technology.
His name is actually Pernell, and we've been doing this for a long time, and we're slowly losing your name. We're not saying it anymore.
I just like having these odd name intros.
And that's okay. But every week we listen to great video game music from the past and the present and from all consoles and all generations. We pick a topic and we just dive right into it. And I'm going to just start with our topic today is the Commodore 64. And we're going to do kind of like a history of the past and the present and some remixes of past games too. Like, we have a lot to talk about, and we could not do this episode without the I don't know. We call you the historian of the Commodore 64.
I like that.
That's a kind way of putting it, Rob. Why not?
Michael Bridgewater from the Forever Sound Version podcast, and also known as Mebri.
Mebri. We'll go with Mebri, yeah.
Mebri of the demo scene. So yeah, anyway, thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks very much for having me, Rob and Pernell. This is my maybe favorite topic in the entire world, the Commodore 64 and the SID chip audio. So this is I've been very excited to talk about this beautiful thing with you both this evening.
This topic's been on our list for a long time, and then we decided we just have to do it now. And as soon as I told you about it, you got so excited.
I did, yes.
I mean, honestly, there's something like anytime the Commodore 64 comes up, it's a general bit of excitement for me because I've played a lot of game consoles in my lifetime, including the Commodore 64. But I feel like the Commodore 64 is probably my least familiar of the retro consoles.
Well, Pernell, I have a surprise for you. You may remember this commercial about the Commodore 64. So
let's go.
Here we go. Let's give it a listen.
I'm more alive than ever before. My friends are knocking down.
This is 80s. This is 80s.
It's my Bahl! Commodore 64 lets you play hundreds more games than any video machine, plus draw, program, even do music.
Do music.
Whoa, do music.
Michael still does music.
We're into our Commodore 64.
Pernell's knocking down my door.
Oh, he is. I want to play Commodore 64.
I don't know if we could carry that energy through the rest of the show, but that's what
I don't think they could have carried it through that entire commercial. There was definitely moments where they re-spliced footage.
So that
they had some killer adverts. Like there's a bunch of them on YouTube, and there's a really famous one that goes, "Are you keeping up with the Commodore? Because the Commodore is keeping up with you," which is quite sinister, actually. But that's their slogan back in the day.
That's
I
terrifying.
generally chuckle about a lot of those ads, Commodore and even the earlier NES ads, where they would have these like extreme scenarios, and the characters like, "Wow, it's like coming out of the screen," but they would show the images like it's a block chasing another block.
Well, you have to think. So the Commodore 64 came out in 1982.
82, yeah.
And this is an 8-bit computer system, not just a game system, clearly not just a game system, but it was a computer system. It read things off of cartridges, it read things off of tapes, had a tape loader, right?
Yeah, it could load off a few different things, so cartridges, tapes, and floppy disks as well.
Okay, great. And then in the 90s, the 8-bit home consoles came to the States, and we threw all of our computers into the trash and just did nothing but play Nintendo.
Well, yeah, I remember also, like, I can't remember what it was. Maybe it was due to mass production, but the computer game consoles was what lended itself to the whole video game crash. So, like, even before NES came over, we had, for some reason, already were like, okay, we're kind of done with these computers.
That's true.
It may well have been just because a lot of... that's what it was. A lot of companies were just like, throwing up shovelware on top of shovelware just because they could.
Yeah.
and they were oversaturating the market with junk.
Yeah, that's right.
So
before the NES, the Famicom came to the States, there was nothing. There was just like hardly any like Atari VCS games coming out, and then that really changed everything. Another thing that kind of put the nail in the coffin on the Commodore 64 out here was the IBM PC systems, like the Tandys and all of the American markets getting into like the home PCs in the early 90s, and then because of the prevalence of all of those shops and of all of like the hardware that was available to us, we just never touched it again. But I understand that the C64 had a special, more of a special place in the UK.
It did. It was extremely prevalent in the UK, but Europe more broadly.
Oh, okay.
In the UK, we had the ZX Spectrum as well.
That's
did
right,
big
yeah.
numbers. Yeah, there's Commodore 64, ZX Spectrum, and to a lesser extent the Amstrad CPC.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, the Commodore 64 was kind of the one that was a bit more expensive and had a lot more RAM than the standard 16K Spectrum. So I think a lot of maybe the Spectrum is what a lot of kids that's what less well-off families would get. The Commodore 64 was for more well-off families or people who could afford it. Or if you came to the system later in the 80s, maybe it was quite a lot more affordable at that point. But initially, it was kind of if we're going to simplify it, it was between the ZX Spectrum and the Commodore 64, depending on how much you were prepared to spend. Yeah.
Oh, I see.
But it does leave me to want to wonder. So I never thought about this until this very moment, actually. The video game crash that comes up in history discussions, or video game history discussions, I think was isolated to the United States. Like, did Europe have that occur?
I think there would have been knock-on effects, certainly, but I think, as Rob alluded to, we were a lot more faithful to the computers, so we kind of just kept on using them, and I think depending on who you ask, maybe the primary threat to the video game industry was arguably piracy, although as we'll find, the piracy cracking scene did spawn a lot of really positive developments as well. So
strangely enough, there's like a full circle thing that we're going to get into here.
Absolutely, yeah. It's a very twisty-bendy kind of scenario historically.
So I'm actually pulled up a wiki on the video game crash of the 80s, and they're saying there's a flooded console market of Atari VCS systems, and the loss of publishing control, which is what you were saying, Pernell, with shovelware. So the control of like the actual Atari company publishing the game, suddenly they weren't in control, and just tons of crap was coming out. And so people just didn't care anymore. And then the home computer systems came out, and more people were interested in having a system that they can do, business applications as well as video games on. That was a big deal. So somehow Nintendo's marketing kind of broke through, and the software and the music became a big part of that.
Well, there's something to say to that, too. Like, if you talk to people in the present and they reflect on the past, they typically tend to say that Nintendo had a rather draconian way of managing games that released on the NES, the Nintendo seal of quality.
Yeah, you couldn't actually the games that were that didn't have the seal that were like created like by like there's the Christian like Bible adventure games.
Oh yeah.
Those are so hard to find now. They're super rare.
Yeah, and but people would rag on that, talk about how draconian they were, but when you discuss the history, you understand also that that's probably a large part of why the NES did what it did. Like, they were like, hey, we can put some quality control behind what comes out on this machine, which means that if it shows up, someone out there had faith in it. It's a quality product.
Right,
You're not going to get a bunch of junk.
I'm going to buy Kid Icarus. I know I'm going to be playing a fun game.
Not E.T., the extra angel.
I'm going to buy Fester's Quest. I know I'm going to buy a fun game. Battletoads? Perfect.
Right.
That was certainly making it easier for the parents who might have been getting the kids this stuff for Christmas. So that's probably a large part of how Nintendo steadied the ship, so to speak.
So I think about
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. I was just going to say this last thing. It's like, when you think about it, we've had discussions, and it's probably going to come up on that future rentals episode. But when you look back on your NES game purchases, whether they were bargain bin or rental, can you really think of, they did exist, yes, but can you think of very many where you played it and you're like, this game is literal junk? Like, this has no business being sold to human beings. Junk. There's one or two that come up in history, but I don't think there was many.
I could start with Top Gun, but there was something there.
Hey, I look back on that, and I used to trash it, but looking back, I wonder if that was more so me than the game. Because I could play it, I just couldn't land the stupid plane.
Man, Pernell, you gotta stop blaming yourself for these things.
Sometimes people just make terrible games.
Well, anyway, this episode is solely focused on the Commodore 64 and the music for the Commodore 64. So, the first part of the show, we're going to be listening to music from the classic games. So, original games from the early 80s, early 90s, music composed for that. And then we're going to get into the kind of the new school or newer school indie side of things. And we're going to listen to new music composed for new games, because there's still a thriving scene of hobbyists who are getting into this thing. And then at the end of the show, we'll get into our remixes like that. But we're talking about the hardware and about the music and what we're about to listen to. So what can you tell us about what is built into the C64 and what makes it so special to the people who are in love with it?
And
I'll do my very best not to go crazy.
Please do. Go nuts.
This could take 5 hours, but it's not going to take that long. So I think one of the, maybe the principal reason the C64's popularity is endured is down to its sound chip, the sound interface device, or SID for short. So where a lot of contemporaneous systems, or even arcade systems of the 80s, and home consoles or whatever would have sort of PSG programmable sound generator chips like the AY or the Sega PSG, which of course are beautiful things. The SID chip is quite a lot different. It's basically like having an analog synthesizer built into your computer, like a 3-channel Moog or something, because it's got the ability to switch between waveform types on an individual channel on the fly, rather than having fixed waveforms like triangle or whatever.
Right, which is what the NES and the Sega PSGs have.
Yeah, and the Game Boy or what have you, yeah. And it has various ways where you can modulate the sound, so it's got filtering capability, which is what gives it a large part of its trademark richness. You'll hear plenty of that soon.
Actually, when I first read about that, I couldn't believe that it had that kind of filtering capability, and I thought it was just like, oh, someone just threw this on, and it was like a hacked like VST virtual synth I was playing with. But then to learn that the Commodore 64 actually had these modulators and envelopes, it's incredible. Like built. It
really is. It's considered a pretty significant feat of like hardware computer engineering for the time. I mean, I think the guy who designed it originally wanted it to be even more advanced, so he had to settle for this 3-channel thing. But there's so many different ways you can hack this thing these days. Like thanks to the demo scene, coders and programmers have found ways of making it sing in various different ways, including different kinds of sample playback to accompany the regular SID synthesis sounds, which is just great because for composers like me, it makes it very, very interesting. I mean, it's just an incredible sound chip. And just to reiterate, I will never ever talk smack about any other platform or sound chip because they're all great. But the SID's the best. I will say that.
Honestly, I think that's a good way to look at it when it comes to like console wars, sound chip wars, whatever. Like, there's no if your product is that good, you should be able to sell it solely on its merits, not by shooting down other things.
Yeah, I do.
Yeah,
when I first started listening to some of this music, like ages ago, honestly, I really fell in love with the sound and how interestingly it's like chunkier. It's like it's got a much more of a rich texture to it than say the NES or the Sega PSG. Now, granted, like my love is still with the YM2612 from the Sega.
Oh, I love that one too.
From the Sega Mega Drive.
I love that one too.
But yeah, we can play favorites, but I still love a lot of different things.
Right. It's kind of like an apples and oranges thing up to a point. Curiously, there are some really exciting developments recently where you can have a cartridge for the C64 that basically gives you, I think it's the YM3812 Yamaha synth chip, which is the same one used in the Adlib sound card. So it's 9 channels of FM synthesis to supplement the SID chip, which is just an absolute dream.
So you supplement the SID chip within the C64 with the Yamaha synthesizer, but you're still sequencing it and programming it on a C64.
All the processing's done by the 6510 in the C64, yeah.
Oh, wow.
And I, of course, had to look up why it's called. Like, for the life of me, it's been this long in my life, I was like, why do they call it C64? I was like, it's probably RAM related because it couldn't be bits.
Yeah.
64K, yeah.
That's it, yeah. There were various expansions, but in the demo scene, for the most part, you're trying to work within the limitations as you might expect. So it's got to be, you can get RAM expansion units, but really to release a regular demo in a competition, it's stock 64K of RAM and no fancy bells and whistles. Just try and make the hardware do as much as it can without you interfering.
Yeah, because if it's in the friggin' name, the moment you expand that RAM, now you're not doing a C64 demo scene track. You're doing a Commodore 128 or whatever. So
yeah, yeah, something like that. That's it.
Well, let's listen to some original tunes. So we're going to be listening to music from games that came out on the original production line for the Commodore 64. So these are definitely working within not just the limitations of the sound chip and that RAM, but there's nothing extra going on here, right? So this is they designed. I don't know. I guess they allocate so much memory for the game, and they have to allocate so much memory for the music, and they even probably played music while the game was loading from a tape. Is that right?
In some cases, yeah. I think my bonus round track will be an example of that, like a remix of one of those tunes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, you got to factor in the available memory and the available CPU time as well, all sorts of things. So yeah, programmers working very, very close to the metal, so to speak, using assembly language, which is super low level.
Yeah, you're telling the processor, like at the operator level, like what to do, which is incredible.
Exactly.
I had some friends that used to do that with their graphing calculators in class, and they would hook it up to their computer, and then they could write assembly level. It was like ZX or Z80 or whatever into the thing, and they tried but it was ostensibly to like program and make little games, but honestly, it was to save notes and cheat during tests. But that's my.
Hey, we got drug wars out of that. I can't complain.
Exactly. That's how you built that stuff. But yeah, let's get started with some music. So we're gonna start with you, Michael.
Okay.
What's your first pick?
So this is a piece of music from a game called Last Ninja 3. I should say at this point that the tunes we're hearing, I took the liberty of recording these from my real hardware. Yeah, so some of these tunes were recorded from a 6581 type SID chip, which is the older model. Some of these tunes are from an 8580, which is like an upgrade with different kind of filter response. This tune I'm going with first, I recorded this from the earlier 6581, and this is Last Ninja 3. It's the intro, so it plays during a cinematic intro sequence, like a quite beautiful one actually for the time being 1991. And the composer is Reyn Ouwehand, a Dutch composer. So yeah, hope you like it. Intro from Last Ninja 3.
This was the intro music from Last Ninja 3, the third to the last ninja for the Commodore 64, composed by Reyn Ouwehand. Is it Ouwehand?
Yeah, Ouwehand, yeah.
Ouwehand, very cool. So yeah, that was a big track, and very long intro. So you said it accompanied a cutscene?
Yeah, it's basically when you first load the game up, you'll see and hear this. I don't think the intro sequence even uses the entire tune, actually, from what I remember. I think that the track in its entirety before it loops is something like 5 minutes long.
Oh wow!
I think they maybe use 2 or 3 minutes of it. But yeah, it's a pretty well loved tune for folks who like this sort of game back in the day. It's basically like an isometric flick screen action adventure game.
Oh, neat.
So it's not the type of game that I've really ever managed to fall in love with. Although it looks great, but I always find the controls maybe a little cumbersome. Growing up with Sonic,
You like that immediate response.
Yeah, I think games have certainly gotten better for that, even on the C64. But yeah, this game does look really pretty. A lot of very, very nicely placed pixels and a lot of great design touches. So yeah, and the soundtrack's just great. Ouwehand's considered one of the greats in the old school SID composition department.
This, yeah,
That's I see.
For it being an original tune, it really sounds advanced. Like those punchy drums and those snare hits, they sound kind of crackly and they just cut through the sound. It sounds really clean. What were you gonna say, Pernell?
It got me thinking when you just described, the game and how it runs. So obviously you're a huge fan of the sound. The sound is pretty much going to be prevalent throughout your entire life. But the gameplay is another story. When you look at the current state of Commodore 64 games and the ones that you would likely still boot up today, while having access to all the other present-day hardware, what would you say are the style of Commodore 64 games that still kind of work in a way of being fun, without making you kind of feel like you should be playing something on a more advanced hardware?
I really like there's a game called Paradroid, which is it's sort of like you're in this spaceship and you're this robot that has to go around getting rid of all these like hostile robots, and you get rid of them by hacking into their mainframes. You can choose to shoot them up, but your weapon's not always great. But you can hack into their mainframes, and there's a sub game where you have to try and basically hotwire them. With this special, it's a really nicely realized game, and then you assume control over these more powerful droids to go around and clean the place out. That one is really, really, maybe it's my favorite C64 game actually, Paradroid. But there's some excellent arcade ports on the C64. I mean, Bubble Bobble is arcade perfect for my money.
No kidding.
There's a C64 version of Bubble Bobble?
It's one of the first games I ever played. Yeah, Bubble Bobble. It's brilliant. There's some games you wouldn't expect to be ported. I mean, if you remember Solomon's Key, which is an NES classic, right? I mean, that was another one of the first games I ever played, the C64 port of Solomon's Key, and yeah, it's again very nicely done. It's sometimes arcade ports are a little bit clunky, or you can tell they just ran out of time. But there were certain teams operating out of the UK who just seemed to be great at reproducing these arcade titles because they had access to the arcade cabinets. The Japanese companies would ship them an arcade cabinet, and they would just pore over all the details graphically and gameplay wise, and just try. It was like an exercise in realizing exactitude with that. So I think a lot of the arcade ports, for someone who spends more time with demos than games, to be completely honest, if I want a quick fix, then I'll go to like Outrun or something like that. Like there's a couple of decent races on the C64
Oh,
too.
very cool.
That's what I like to hear, because when you look at like gaming, and it shifts by generation, of course, what you grew up with per se. But you look back on say a lot of NES games, which is like one of the big flagstones for like, hey, this was my retro console. And you look at games that play like NES games, but on more modern hardware. There's some games where you're like, this game does it in a way where I don't think I'd ever want to go back and play these older ones. But by that same token, there are timeless games on the NES. Just like there are timeless games on the C64, where it's like, despite them having been done on stronger hardware, I can still go back to this old game, play it, and feel absolute joy in it. Like, there's no, I'm not taking any losses by experiencing this game style in this way. And that's why I wanted to ask you that, because you're the most Commodore 64 knowledgeable person I know.
You're most
thank you.
versed in this. Yeah, so moving on, we're going to another title. This is... Oh, wait, I had a question, and I'm not sure if this is just something maybe I've... In my mind, I've drawn these correlations in between the two things, but when I look back at some of the classic NES games, classic NES music that I really loved, like stuff from Tim Fallon and from Rob Hubbard, like when I go back, I'm like, oh, these tracks on the NES are super, super long. Like the intro to Skater Die 2 and Solstice is like a 9-minute epic that I just in love with. Do you think that the length of these tunes was informed from like maybe their work on the C64?
Probably, yeah. I mean, Rob Hubbard, since you mentioned him, he did compose some tunes that just went on and on and on. I mean, you were glad they did, because there's some very beautiful propulsive stuff in his repertoire of SID tunes. But I would guess that maybe it's like if you can imagine this continuum between arcade machines on the one hand and home computers on the other. In an arcade, you only have so much time. You want to maximize your money. The home computer, you can kind of sit and meditate on it, maybe. So the tunes might be longer for that reason. I think there's probably something in that, Rob. Yeah.
I always wondered about that. Like I always thought maybe it was a port from the tune, but a lot of times there were new tunes. But I don't know, it was just really interesting to me that it was always the Western composers, and then there's composers that had roots with the Amiga or the C64.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
All right, so now we're going to move to a game called Ferrari Formula 1. This is the title music, composed by Barry Leitch, and let's give it a go. Loading, ready, run.
Gentlemen, start your engines.
Has been the title theme from Ferrari Formula 1 for the Commodore 64, composed by Barry Leitch. and this has some real big time synthwave energy in it. I love that classic 80s like synth sound, like all of those like chord arpeggiations and just that driving drum. And I picked this tune because it sounded to me so much like Test Drive, and then of course Michael pointed out that was also Barry Leitch. So
I believe it's the same guy. Yeah, he was kind of the go-to guy for Amiga racing game music. I think he did like Top Gear stuff as well. Yeah, he's got pedigree in that department for sure.
It's amazing.
And it surprises me too. Like, if I remember correctly, I know released this kits for Test Drive, but apparently I guess Top Gear too. Like, those games originated on like classic computer software, hardware, as opposed to like the SNES where I first played them.
Yeah,
that's right. Yeah.
My first time playing Test Drive was on my IBM or my Tandy PC or whatever, and it was like the classic like pink and blue CGA colors, which I don't know. I have a lot of nostalgia for that. But yeah, a lot of that started on computer systems. A lot of cool racing games on the Amiga that were then ported to the NES. So it had like a much wider audience.
I used to love Top Gear, something fierce.
Top Gear was
Test
fun,
Drive, where I most remember is like you'd be driving, like for some reason they just thought they'd go the extra mile and like, render bird splatter on your freaking car when they crap on your windshield. Like, what is this?
Now I don't know much about the Ferrari Formula One, but do you know anything about this one?
Yeah, so I think a lot of the appeal for Top Gear and games like that that also have Barry Leitch on the sound is that those games are very immediate and they're not really simulations. They're kind of arcadey a lot of the time. This game is the polar opposite in that it's very highly involved as far as the detailed pre-race setup and all that goes. It's like a simulation, and the racing itself is kind of very slow and jerky. It's far from the best racing game on the C64, but it does have the big tune and it does have all the options, so it's kind of impressive in its own way, but I wouldn't call it actively fun as such.
That's the tagline on the box. Not immediately fun, but
yeah. Do you like fun options? We've got options.
Do you want the sense of enjoyment? We can try to give you that.
I tried to get into like racing simulation type games. I always thought it would be something like some kind of nerdy like thing I could get into, but I love the immediacy of arcade racing. I think Pernell is probably on a similar spectrum.
Closest I've come to it is the original Gran Turismo games, whereas I tried to sit down with those, but when it came time to start tweaking like the freaking shocks on the car, I lost interest. And then like what ends up happening further is since I got into the review kick, every once in a while like my guy will be like, "Hey, you want to review this game? It's called Ride 3." I'm like, "Ooh, it's motorcycles. This sounds great." And I'll take it and I start playing. I'm like, "Wait a minute, I gotta tweak the bike. I have to actually work on the bike. I don't want to do that. I just want to drive
mechanics for, surely."
And then you start driving the bike, and it's not just accelerate and never use the brakes and then cut turns. Like, no, you're just constantly falling off the bike because it is definitely a sim-style racer. There is no just pedal to the metal all the time.
I think a lot of people our age had a very similar experience of putting in Gran Turismo, hearing all of this cool stuff about it, booting it up for the first time, and then like racing to the first corner, and then immediately not being able to turn hard enough, and then just going way off the track. Be like,
not to mention, like, it was also like the very first game I could think of where it was like, oh, cool racing game, and you put it in the system, you're ready to pick your car and go. But no, the first thing you gotta do is earn your driver's license.
Oh yeah, on the career mode,
teach you to play the game first, guys.
Because if I remember correctly, there was like tiers of races, and then to qualify for the next tier of race, you had to get a brand new driver's license, which was at new courses. It's like, what is this? But there was also that guy down the hall, 'cause I was in college at the time. Always that guy down the hall was like, "Oh yeah, new driver's license exam! I can't wait!" Like, what is this?
I can't wait! And then across the hall, someone screams, "No!
Exactly.
Get him! All right, Pernell, what's your first pick for the show?
Well, I actually really like the picks that I made for this episode because due to the topic and the resources that Michael gave us with which to say, hey, don't just dive in blind, use some tools.
Oh yeah, we should say, Michael, you've really come through for the show. I mean, you gave us players, you gave us like history, like in text files, and then just an enormous compilation of files for us to play and listen to on the show. It's fantastic stuff. So thank you so much.
No worries at all, man. It was my pleasure. I mean, this stuff is just one of the loves of my life. So it was any excuse to indulge in that is always something I'll jump on. So no worries there.
Well, it made
at
our
one
jobs
point-
a little bit easier. So I didn't mean to cut you off for now, but it's
not even-
huge.
That's the funny thing. It's not even so much that it made it easier because, like, to give you an example, before I was going to pick here's a track from Gradius on the C64. It got ported, and that would have been an easy choice for me because I'm familiar with Gradius. It's just now it's a C64 port. But due to the tools, I was able to say, you know what? Let's see if I can learn about some games that I've never in my life heard of before that were only on the C64 to my knowledge. And if it was on anything else, it was on another piece of hardware that I didn't own. So it still works. So every game I picked from, I have never played before. I only heard of it because of this episode, and I love that. So this first pick comes from a game called Octapolis. It is titled High Score Entry, referenced on the SID as Subtune 3, composed by Wally Beben.
Octapolis, a tale of 8 cities.
each run by one of 8 octopolis. Welcome back. You're listening to the High Score Entry theme, aka Subtune 3, from the game Octapolis on the Commodore 64, composed by Wally Beben. So, this game actually resonated well with me by just like watching how the game played out, like the style of it. It was one of those like games where there are like there's two halves of the gameplay. Where first and foremost, I have no idea what the premise of the game is, so I don't know why you're doing any of it. But the first phase involves like you flying a ship on a horizontal plane, shooting down targets, and ultimately trying to make your way to land the ship to enter a sort of, I guess, like I just kind of imagine it as like an octo base populated by monstrosities and weird big-headed critters. And your character has to go from screen to screen, usually entering from one zone, and then exiting out another, and then entering the next screen in a place completely unrelated to where you exited the previous screen. And your overall goal is to get to the exit at the end of the course, and you're being timed as you do it. You get a gun, and you can jump. Some enemies, from where I can tell, you can't even hurt, and others you can, so occasionally you're trying to avoid them and dodge around them while the clock's ticking. So I honestly thought it was a pretty cool little game, and the music resonated well with me, too. I'm a sucker for tracks where, well, of course, as Rob mentioned, they're high tempo. Mm-hmm. But also, I don't know what it is about me, but like that sound that usually comes where it sounds like water, like you're in the water. I don't know how else to describe it. It just sounds like you're underwater.
Yeah, that's the sort of the kind of sustained textural sound underneath, right?
Yes.
That's like that classic fast arpeggiation, but it's done on the triangle wave, which is like the softest of the available waves. So it does kind of just sit at the bed of the track, kind of padding the whole thing out. It's a nice little technique.
This is used very well in this track because, well, I was enamored with it. And this is the type of game that, as I watched it play out, and I watched a few sequences of it get played, I was like, I think this is the kind of game that even today, if someone said, hey, Pernell, let's race in Octapolis, I would totally play it. I would absolutely play it and enjoy it. So, I hope I made a decent showing with my first C64 track, but this is something I appreciate.
So. Oh yeah, that's cool.
So what can you tell us a little bit about how you were able to record these tracks?
There was no particular magic really. I mean, I've got so as I say, there's two revisions of the SID chip, 6581 and 8580, and I've got two Commodore 64s, an older one which you call the bread bin model because it looks kind of like a bread box, and the more recent one, which is when they overhauled the design in 86 to make it look a little bit more like the emerging Amigas and Atari STs, just to upgrade the design. And the upgraded design has the 8580. So I just ascertained which SID was appropriate for the certain picks, and then I would take like an AV cable. I've got like an S video cable, so there's there's the standard composite red, white, and yellow, and then there's also the S video connector. And I would use the S video connector to plug that into my laptop's capture device to monitor.
There's an S video from the C64.
Not directly out of it, but I've got a cable which is for S video output wise, and I just basically took the red and white RCA connectors, put some jack adapters on there, and jammed it into the front of my laptop's audio interface, which I'm using to talk to you now, and then just played with the levels, made sure the signal to noise ratio was okay, and that was kind of it. It's a similar process to when I set up for these streams I've been running lately on Twitch, like running demos and things. So there's no particular tricks. It's just a little bit of practice and experience to get it sounding okay.
Now, are you able to? Do you have to boot up the game itself to listen to the tune where it's playing, or are there collections of the music like files?
Yes, So all of the music we're playing here is in the form of SID files, SID format, which they're all available for free from the High Voltage SID collection, or HVSC, which is updated twice annually. It's all available online, it's all shared, so all the classic tunes from games, intros, demos, and all the new stuff as well as it's released is added to that. And there are certain programs you can run through your modern machines, your Commodore 64, with modern peripherals in lieu of disk drives to load these SID files and play them back.
So for folks who are like familiar with the idea of like some retro game music, some players but aren't familiar with the SID, think of it akin to NSF files for an NES sound collection. Right. It's a similar idea.
Yeah, it's kind of what a SID file is. Yeah, so there are some programs that you can run on the C64 by way of your, not a disk drive, but like a special cartridge which emulates a disk drive, and then you stick the SID chip, the SID files in there and run them, and they will play. It's
a glorious thing.
Now, because the music played during the game, would it sound differently because the processor was also being used to handle like gameplay and input and graphics and things?
That depends. Some games just didn't have, just had sound effects anyway. There's only a handful of games I can think of where there is a noticeable slowdown in the tune starts slowing down when the CPU is particularly busy, but most of the time there'd be a certain like sufficiently economical approach to programming which would avoid issues like that. One most recent example I can think of slowdown in a SID tune during a game, which is pretty rare, is there was an unlicensed, unofficial port of Super Mario Brothers, originally on the NES, for the C64, and I swear to God, it is incredible just how accurate it is. It's astonishing. It's almost perfect. But when you need a bit of maybe a RAM expansion to stop the slowdown from happening if there's more than 3 Goombas on the screen at once. But other than that, and other than the fact you need the up direction to jump, which I think a lot of people would find a bit weird. It's the same game. I'd wholeheartedly recommend it. Of course, Nintendo shut it down immediately, but it's out there.
I was about to ask, like that. I was going to ask, and now I need to do some research because I'm wondering if. I mean, you did end up following by saying Nintendo shut it down, but I was wondering if that's what resulted in spawning Gianna Sisters, is because Nintendo shut down the Mario port, so someone was like, you know what? Here's Mario and everything but the name.
Yeah, Gianna Sisters was Rainbow Arch just being kind of cheeky. But yeah, this Mario port, this came out last year.
That was recent.
Well, that's a great lead into our next set of tunes. So now we're going to talk about the indie scene, or kind of not really the demo scene, but like the new school of the C64. So the C64's, I guess, heyday has come and gone, and now we have programmers and enthusiasts coming in and building and programming their own new software, new games for the older system. Is that right?
Yeah, pretty much. I think there's a lot of crossover between the demo scene and the modern C64 game development scene. So the composer I've got up my sleeve right here, and yours as well, Rob, are active in the demo scene. So yeah, there's a bit of crossover, certainly.
That makes a whole lot of sense. And the time frame, like, so the C64 kind of lost its steam, I guess, in the early 90s or like the late 80s. And so the indie game homebrew scene started about, like, are there games in the 90s, or was it the early 2000s that people became more interested in?
Yeah. There was still some development for games and demos as well throughout the 90s, but it did slow to a trickle, and then there was kind of a resurgence in the 2000s, and that gathered steam gradually. And right now it's probably as busy. The scene's as busy now as it has been since
very interesting.
Maybe 93, I'm guessing. It's great time for the scene, certainly.
Okay, well, let's listen to some modern retro. I don't know what we're gonna call it. If we're gonna call it modern C64 tunes, we're gonna start with your pick.
Yeah, it's a funny paradox, isn't it? But I suppose that's what it is. Well, this pick is from a game called Slipstream, released in 2017, and this is really interesting. This is a 3D polygonal rail shooter.
What?
You can imagine that running on a C64. And it was
does
developed
this processor
by
get like super hot or something, or?
Probably, yeah. Burn your hands on that thing. It was developed by the demo scene and game development group Bahl, which I'm probably horribly mispronouncing. But yeah, this is one of the in-game tunes from a level called Aquilae. And the composer, who is a great fella, is Ronny Engmann, also known as dalezy in the demo scene. So yeah, Aquilae from Slipstream.
All right. This is Aquilae from the game Slipstream for the C64, composed by Ronny Engmann, or dalezy. Wow, that is some deep stuff. That is some deep bass. I am into that tune. You said he's from Berlin?
Yeah, he lives, I don't know if he's from there originally, but he lives in Berlin now. And yeah, a couple of years ago I went to a demo party in Berlin and he was there. He had an old school music entry for the competition there, and I had one as well. So we got talking about Sid music and music more broadly. He produces some electronic music of his own. So as you can probably tell, he's into his like minimal techno and his hard like ambient and industrial kind of stuff. Yeah, he's great. I had to play a tune by him. And Slipstream, I don't think he's done too many game soundtracks, but yeah, Slipstream's the one that came to mind immediately. yeah, just this really nice handling of the Sid's filter, as you heard on the kicks and the hi-hats.
It had a really deep, like, Detroit techno kind of feel to it, like from like the 90s. I used to listen to. What was it? I'm trying to think of the guy's name. Rob something.
I want to say, is it Hubbard?
No. No, it was like
Nichols.
Oh, I'll find
Nichols.
Rob Nichols. That was me. No, we were talking about like how the filtering. I was watching this one video of a guy playing with a filter. He hooked up MIDI knobs and extra knobs to his C64 so he could play with the filter on it. And as he was doing it, he was making faces and getting into it. And it really reminded me when I got my first Korg outboard synth, plugged it into my drum machine with a MIDI cable, and then sequenced it into my little 4-track tape player, or 4-track tape recorder. And I was like, this is the best thing in the world. I hit play it, and it syncs up, and then I can just play with the filter knob and be like, yes, I am the ultimate DJ, you know?
Yeah, you were a bad man back in the day, yeah.
I mean, it didn't go anywhere. It never left the bedroom, but...
He kept simmered down. Now he's become, like, he's here, have some lemonade. He's a mellow man.
It's all about the lo-fi hip hop now. I don't know. That's really cool. It's really interesting that it's such a minimal tune too, where you could tell so much care went into every individual sound to sound that way, especially after all of the music that we just heard. And then going into it's
a good point.
It's stripped down to just being like as really perfect as they could make it.
Yeah, this highlights the kind of simple fact that music's like this, melody and harmony is not a salient dimension to it. So, you know, all the most salient musical information's in the handling of the timbres and the textures, right, as it progresses. It's sort of like vertically stacked textures rather than unraveling over time. So I think you can tell he's got a lot of experience, like listening and producing this stuff like off the SID chip as well as on it, I think.
All right, so kind of on the other side of this kind of minimal side of things, I'm going to go into my next track. This is from the game The Vice Squad. The Vice Squad, which
The Vice Squad.
Yes. Pernell, you're going to dig this one. I mean, this is right down my alley. I'm talking pitch bends and crazy melodies. This is by
Arpeggio?
Pernell, full of arpeggios.
The arpeggio effect?
Yeah, I want that on a t-shirt and give it to Pernell, make him wear it.
The arpeggio effect.
This is by Sascha Zeidler, also known as Linus, and this is the title tune from The Vice Squad.
Go down.
All right, we're back. You're listening to the title song from The Vice Squad for the Commodore 64, composed by Sascha Zeidler, also known as Linus. And man, this is it's got everything I love about classic game music with the pitch bends and the rhythm changes, and it takes how it just takes you on like this full journey. It's fantastic. So yeah, I'm gonna search out more from this artist.
I'll help you out with that. And he's in one of the groups I'm in. It's a music group called Multi-Style Labs, and he's also in the same group. So I speak to him reasonably regularly. He's a great guy, and he's been doing this for quite a while. Yeah, he's kind of the master of the filter bass in my book. And you heard those like echoes on going across the channels. You said it was sort of like classic Tim Follin music, right? And
yeah,
I can hear that on this particular tune.
But leading up to that, those huge bass filter sweeps leading up to that, like that to me, that's a modern sound. Like that's something out of like a drum and bass like tune, just like everything else is happening up here, but then there's this huge like sweep of like a belching, like wow, and I'm like, yes. More. A lot
of his early demo tunes were in the drum and bass style, so that's about right, I think.
Oh, geez, okay, great, perfect, all right.
You're gonna like this guy, yeah.
I think we're gonna get on great. That's what.
Yeah.
So the Vice Squad. When was this released?
2013. This game was released.
Wow.
Did you see any of the gameplay of this one?
Honestly, no. I didn't look anything up on this one.
Yeah, it's kind of how to describe it. It's like a top-down. Vehicular combat sim, because you're like it's the Vice Squad, so you're a cop, and there are these and there's like a Mexican drug lord who you're trying to hunt down, and he's got his henchmen in black cars that you have to take out with your car-mounted firearms. And you're just flying along a road, avoiding obstacles, trying not to
makes me think about Spy
damage
Hunter.
other people.
Yeah, Pernell, you're right on. I'm watching it now. It's like a horizontal scrolling Spy Hunter.
Spy Hunter's about right, yeah.
Yeah, but the graphics kind of remind me of Spy Hunter and remind me a little bit of Grand Theft Auto, the original Grand Theft Auto.
Okay.
Right.
But probably that was inspired a lot by Spy Hunter, and maybe also. I was going to say also the Vice Squad, but definitely not.
Inspired by a real Vice Squad.
I think my timeline's got a little mixed up here, but man, this is a fantastic tune. I'm so into this. I'm so happy to hear that. Like a lot of this other stuff that's in that drum and bass style.
It does explain how our tracks are so different, though. Because I think both games you picked from came out in more later years. Like the games I'm picking for, these just come out like 85, 84. So I feel a little better. I was like, how's Rob finding these meaty tracks? I'm like, mine's like beep, boop, boop.
Well, come on, Pernell. Your next track has got to be super meaty too. What's your next tune?
Well, less meaty, more clam chowdery, but still good.
Yeah.
Still good because I love clam chowder.
It's still tasty.
Yes, right. God, I want some right now. This comes from a game I also learned about again from prepping for this episode. The game is titled The Ark of Yesod, or Yesod, however you want to pronounce it. And it is Subtune 1, the title theme. For the Commodore 64, composed by Keith Tinman, or Tinman, or Tinman.
The Ark of Yesod sounds like a Falcom RPG, doesn't it?
It really
That's
does.
what drew me to it when I was looking at it. I was like, Ark of Yesod, I'm in.
Yeah, that's it's probably amazing. Where's the anime girls in this one?
Not a one!
You will be disappointed.
Welcome back. You are listening to Subtune 1, aka the title theme from the game The Ark of Yesod, or Yesod. The Commodore 64 composed by Keith Tinman. This game, honestly, we were joking about it, but in its own way, I was actually kind of serious. In that Rob was like, this has like a Falcom-y sound to the title. And I'm like, well, that's honestly why I gravitated towards it when I was like perusing titles. Like, oh, here's one worth looking at. The Ark of Yesod. I wonder, and then Rob goes, were the anime girls? I'm like, no. But what I did find was what appeared to be a game that involved a man who was I guess like a astronaut who was like docking on surfaces of like moon bases or space stations or floating orbital spheres. I don't know what it was supposed to be. And he would die. He would go into it, and he was exploring room by room, trying to find like various components. And he even had like a small inventory that he could work with, which was kind of cool. Again, to go back to like the horse that I keep beating, but it gave me vibes of like, you know, like those like the games that La Mulana was based around.
Yeah,
like those old exploration games.
Yeah, very exploratory. I'm watching some of the gameplay now, and it's like you're these rooms that you're in. It's screen by screen. It's not scrolling. It doesn't scroll across like a Metroid game. So it's very interesting. You don't know what to expect into the next room. Although if you jump from room to room, your velocity does kind of carry you. So you use it to get from platform to platform. It looks very confusing. But the but the graphics are really incredible. Like, I mean, obviously it's an 8-bit system. It's very simple, but the animation is very smooth, very, very smooth. It's really impressive.
It makes you really kind of just think about game design and how it's evolved over the years, because there's like certain things where, like, for example, you just described Ark of Yesod, where you could jump from one screen into another expecting to land somewhere. And these are like certain gameplay designs where if you put it in a present day game, people would be in your face about like, this is poor game design. Why would you do that? You have to make these blind off-screen jumps. But back in the day, it was borderline a feature. It's like, hey, well, this is the limits of our technology, but to get around that, you can just jump between screens and then kind of land somewhere. So now it's a skill and a tactic to memorize rooms and know to jump from the top of the one room to come down to the bottom of the other. So it's like, it's something I appreciate. Like, I like that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And of course, if I'm going to play a game that involves having to run quickly, high velocity gameplay, I want it to scroll. I don't want to make blind jumps. But if it's like a slow, methodical game, I'm totally cool with this. It works.
Or have the rooms be a little bit larger, like in the game that we've been playing. Hold on, La Mulana. Oh my god! Because there's a lot of places in La Mulana where you do have to kind of make these long blind jumps. But of course, the game is punishing you.
Yes.
I don't know what it knows about me that it knows that I need to be punished, but somehow it does, and it's like you're bad. You've been a bad game player.
Fun fact: the game was actually produced in Silent Hill, Pennsylvania.
What was it now? Huh.
The game is specially designed to be in tune with all of our personal sins when it gets to our door.
That's right. It looks different to everybody. Is that what it is?
That's right. I never found that room, Rob. What are you talking about?
Oh, man. It's like I know what you did last summer.
The game.
All right, so we're going to turn this track down, and we're going to get into our part of our show we call Bonus Round.
Bonus round. Let's go!
The bonus rounds where we play covers and remixes and arrangements on our theme, and this episode is no different. We're going to be looking at remixes and arrangements of classic C64 tunes and maybe even something a little extra. So, Michael, what have you found for us?
I've been a little bit sly. My bonus round pick is another Sid tune, but it is a 2016 remake of a loader tune from a game released in 1986. So one of the very first games I ever played, any video games I ever played, or soundtracks I ever heard, was from Sanxion on the C64, which was composed by Rob Hubbard.
Very classic.
So I'd go over to my granddad's house and I'd load up the tape and be sitting waiting for this game to load, and it'd give you this really incredible loader tune by Hubbard as the title screen gradually revealed itself. I kind of thought about including this tune, but then it was sort of really hard to whittle my picks down to 2. So I thought, maybe I can include this in the bonus round. And there's a guy called Jason Page who's active as a musician in the demo scene. He's also had a career in the games industry. He's done a bunch of soundtracks and things for Amiga games and PS1 games as well. Now he's returned to the C64, and yeah, he did this remake of Hubbard's Sanxion loader tune, which is uses a special technique where you can play SID sound back at a multi-speed, like a multiple of the normal 50 hertz. So this is a 4 times speed SID tune, which affords you a bit more in the way of sound design and instrument design, which I think you might hear when the tune gets going. It's got some really fancy percussion and things on this one.
Oh,
so yeah, this is called Sanxion Remix. So originally composed by Rob Hubbard, but arranged by Jason Page in 2016.
This is something else. Wow. Even with a fade out, this is the remix of the Sanxion loader tune, composed by Rob Hubbard and arranged for the C64 many years later by the composer Jason Page. Wow, man. There's so much. Is this still the same hardware they're using?
It's the exact same stock C64, stock SID. Again, it's he's used a multi-speed technique for the sake of getting some more instruments squeezed into that thing. But it's the same. It's the same tune basically in the same system. I mean, to me, it still sounds really old school C64, but it's with that multi-speed edge gives the drums in particular like a lot more bite.
It does,
and a lot more crispness, yeah.
And because of that, it sounds a little more balanced. Like I think the original, for me, the original is a little harsh for my taste. It's just like because the lead is really, really heavy and
it's shrill.
It's pretty shrill, yeah. But this one, it's just balanced all the way around. I encourage our listeners to listen to these tracks. At the end of the episode, I encourage you to go back and listen to these tracks with headphones on or in your car, because the bass that's coming through this is nothing. You would never hear bass like this on an NES or on like a Sega PSG, maybe the Master the Mega Drive or the Sega Genesis, but usually not the Super Nintendo. You're not going to hear this kind of bass, and that has to do a lot to do with the filtering, right?
Exactly, yeah. So there's certain techniques where, because it's a fully functional filter for like lower pass as well as band pass and high pass, and you can combine those modes as well. So what I think he's doing is he's combining low pass with band pass. And there's also like not only is there a cutoff setting, but there's also resonance. So it's like cranking up the resonance and just going bow, getting really, really low. You can go really, really low, and it's almost like a 303 or something.
Yeah,
at times.
Just for having the chip being able to produce that low of a frequency to begin with. As if you were to filter down like on an NES, you would filter it down far past where it was able to produce any sound. But like you said, this was an analog synthesizer built into the
more or
machine.
less.
Yeah, so it was able to
more or less.
It's able to go that low. How low can you go? All right, so all right, so my track is an actual remix. This is called this from the game Turrican. This is the Generation mix. It is by Chris Hulsbeck, I know, and S. Hartwig I also had listed.
Yeah.
And then this is arranged by Gerd Bahl. That was the title theme or loader theme from the game Turrican, the Generation Mix. This was composed by Vaca, S. Hartwig, and Chris Hulsbeck, and arranged by Gerd Bahl. And yeah, that I love when it goes halftime and then like the synths get all like picky. I don't know, it's cool. I really like this tune. And you pointed out something interesting during the track.
Yeah, it turns out this tune is technically an arrangement of an arrangement because the composers for the Turrican game on the C64 copied the composition from a tune called Escape by Vince DiCola, which was on the 1986 Transformers movie. So any Transformers fans out there who have thought, oh, this is kind of familiar, that'll be why. Yeah.
This also makes me realize I really should go back and watch that again, because when I was a kid, I watched it ad nauseum, but I haven't seen it in easily 30 plus years.
Yeah, I don't remember much about it. I remember being really into Transformers as a kid, but I never had like any toys, so it was never like on the forefront of like my mind. So
Optimus Prime died. That was the big, oh my god, no!
Oh, spoilers.
I think the limitations are up.
You don't have the touch. You don't have the touch.
I just remember back when that released, I can't even think of many movies having the guts to do that in the present. And back then, kids were like in the theaters crying, like shedding actual tears because Optimus Prime died. Of course, they ended up bringing him back later in like a future, feature film later. But that time, though, it was amazing to see a studio take
spoilers.
that charge.
They brought him back. Pernell, you gotta cool it. You gotta cool it, man.
They're robots in disguise. Did you know that?
Oh man, Pernell. They could be anywhere.
They could be this PC.
All right. What did you find for the bonus round, Pernell?
My last track is coming from a game which I actually think did get a console port at some point, like another console, because I've heard of this game before this episode. But it's called Chase HQ2. It's an arrangement done by, it was originally composed by Klaus Grøngaard and arranged by Guru Meditator. Welcome back. I hope everyone listened to and enjoyed. Well, you listened to it. Whatever words. You just listened to Chase HQ2, composed by Klaus Grøngaard and arranged by Guru Meditator. This track is a jam. I love it. I enjoyed it very much. I hope you guys did too. If not, why? What is wrong with you? You're insane because this is a peach.
I love that, man. That was a great... See, you brought the fire on this one. That was good.
Absolutely, yeah. Killer pick.
This is just... I like episodes like this. They're harder to prep for, but they end up being worth it in the end because you just come out with these new and unexpected treats that, honestly, I want to do more with. Like, I wonder... I'm going to have to check my emulator downstairs to see if I can actually add C64 to it. I bet I could.
Yeah,
because
how easy is it for modern emulation of C64, like on like Windows hardware?
Or a RetroPie.
Easy.
Extremely easy, yeah. So your best bet is an emulator called Vice, V-I-C-E. It's onto some kind of version 3 at this point, but I think I would still recommend the latest version 2 of Vice. It emulates everything you'd want it to emulate, really, for playing demos and emulating the cycle exact speeds of the disk drives so you can run software properly as if it were on a real system. Runs tape images, cartridge images, various RAM expansions and things if you want to try that. But I mean, if you just want to like drag and drop a game into there and just play it, then it's also very straightforward. It's as complex as you need it to be, but it's also very easy to just drop in and play games as well. So
awesome.
Yeah, Vice version 2, whatever the last one was, is you can't really go wrong with that one.
Nice.
All right.
Well, for more information on the bonus round, go to rhythmandpixels.com. We're going to have links to all of these places where you can find remixes, or find the artists, and even find some interesting information and stuff on the demo scene, all there, and you can support these artists. All right, thanks for listening to episode 23-4 of Rhythm and Pixels. This is our Commodore 64 showcase with our special guest, our friend Michael Bridgewater. Thank you for coming on.
Hey, thank you both. Thank you once again. It's been a lot of fun, and honestly, it gave me a lot of joy to hear you both exploring some SID tunes and finding stuff to like in this corner of my world. Which, it's been a lot of fun.
I will be continuing to utilize it too, so don't be surprised if all of a sudden like, whoa, Parnell's starting to like these more SID tracks.
It's something that Parnell and I have always really enjoyed, but we never really took the time to dive into and explore and to learn more about. So having you on, you've spent so much time and you have so much love for the sound and for the chips and for everything. It's I knew it would be really important to have you on the show, just to help us with the picks and help us with everything about it. But before we head out of here, is there anything else you want to mention about the system or about the computer system that we didn't talk about? Maybe a shout out to the demo scene or anything like that,
or maybe a favorite recipe.
Yeah, recipe.
Oh, I'm no top chef, unfortunately. What can I tell you? Well, I suppose if there's one short but prevailing message about what the C64 means to people these days, it's that. As much as it is obviously a retro platform that existed back in the 80s and early 90s, I think for a lot of us, we still see it as the future. It's kind of our creative voice. It's our avenue to making more stuff tomorrow, right? So it's kind of a dynamism between it being retro, but also the way we choose to express ourselves, trying new things out, squeezing as much as possible out of this set of chips as we can. And in my domain, it is the SID chip. So. There are so many composers who do great stuff. The group I'm in, the music group I'm in, Multi-Style Labs, has a bunch of exceptional composers. We've already heard from Linus, Sascha Zeidler. There's also Jammer, Engmann, Shogun. There's loads of top names, and there are various resources online, including YouTube, obviously, to check out. Just listen to some new SID music coming out. It's coming out all the time. If you want to hear some stuff I've done recently, I released in this strange ongoing lockdown situation. I decided to release a Bandcamp compilation, like a collection of tunes I released between, I think it was March 2018 and May 2020 this year. So if you want to check out some stuff that I've done, then it's mibri.bandcamp.com, and that's Mibri is Mibri. So yeah, there's a compilation on there called Dedication, which is expresses how dedicated I am to the C64. So
it's
yeah,
interesting like the connection to the VGM podcasting too, because I know that you've done some of the artwork done for the demo scenes. So the demo stuff that you've done was done by Ben Dishman, the Dyad.
That's right.
The show that Dyad presents. So it's very interesting to me how these things all kind of interconnect with each other now.
Now, and out of curiosity, like when you got that art commission, was this before you knew about him through the VGM podcast scene?
I knew him through the VGM podcast thing first, and then as my enthusiasm for the scene grew, we'd just be sharing stuff all the time online, and then I dragged him kicking and screaming into pixel art for the C64, and now we're in the same group. It's a group called Proxima of Norwegian origin, originally a PC demo group in the 90s, but it's been rebooted as a multi-platform demo group. So yeah, it's been cool working with him on some productions. We did a demo last year called Aroused, Aroused from the slumber of the group. So check out Aroused by Proxima on YouTube. So there's some graphics by the Dyad, and there's a heavily disco-inspired soundtrack by me on there, if anyone can dig that.
I can dig that. Oh yeah, so we're going to have links to all of that stuff on the website and all of that stuff when this gets re-uploaded through YouTube. So yeah, thank you for your time.
Hey, no doubt.
If you'd like to get in contact with our show, if you have any questions or topic suggestions or even track suggestions, please send us an email.
rhythmandpixels@hotmail.com.
And for a full track listing of this episode and all of our episodes and access to all of our episodes, go to our website,
rhythmandpixels.com.
And if you're interested in checking us out on the social media platforms, Facebook and Twitter and Instagram, it's Rhythm and Pixels, all one word. You can go to youtube.com/rhythmandpixels, and we have all of our episodes are uploaded there, as well as a 24/7 music stream of nothing but 8-bit and 16-bit classics that will soon have some new radio promos from our Patreon members. So if you'd like to support our show, you can go to patreon.com/rhythmandpixels, and you can support any way you can there. You get access to prequel episodes every week, and then also access to a live streamed recorded episode once a month that we do here. And then there's also additional incentives for higher tiers, but we'd like to thank our Patreon members at the end of every episode. We'd like to thank That Nick Walker, The Last Weekend, Mike Myers, Sonic Medley, Taco, Harold Howard, Dave Taylor, Reinhard Zelkova, Andreas Mirelberg, Dan Loughton, Phantom Jest, Steve Miller, The Autistic Gamer 89, Cameron Werma, Christopher Shenstrom, Bobby Arson from One Up Funk, Wicked Sephiroth, Carlos, Kung Fu Carlito from the Heroes 3 podcast, Michael Bridgewater, hey,
I know that guy!
From the Forever Sound Version podcast, and Brian Pitt. So thank you all very much for your continued support of our little show. And I'm not sure what we've got planned next week, but we do have a schedule, and we're going to stick to it, darn it.
Unless something really cool gets squeezed in there, which means, holy cow, that would be a great episode topic.
It could happen. But yeah, as we move into the next phase of these levels of quarantine, eventually we'll start having Purnell work his way back into the studio. And later
like a
today,
worm, like a snake.
Like a snake. Later today, we're going to have a barbecue outside, and we'll be outdoors and having a good time. So,
so cool.
So maybe on the next live stream, we'll both be in the same room. Who knows? Might be kind of nice.
It would be nifty, because, like, fun fact about me, like, for a lot of people, like, you know, I haven't, like, I've gone to, like, every once in a while, like, people's house, like, just kind of stood across from them or whatever, but as far as, like, actually hanging around and being around people, it's been months. Literal months. Like, life is so strange.
Life is very strange right now. And like I said, we miss you. You and my wife. We both miss you. So.
But one thing I always say, though, can you imagine if this happened 20 years ago? Oh, God, no.
We'd all be on the phones.
I wonder about that.
Yeah.
It's like, well, I could only play through Mega Man X2 so many times. I'll go talk to somebody. Who? I'll call someone on the phone. Hey, crap, what do you mean your brother's on the phone? Crap, well, I guess I gotta...
I guess we should be thankful, the cause of and solution to all of our problems, the internet.
Yeah.
Yeah, the thing to be able to do things like this and to meet with people,
Absolutely.
like you, Michael, across the globe here. So.
Yeah, likewise. It's a bit
You
of
gotta
a
say
kick for me as
pond,
well.
Rob. You gotta say it. Across the pond.
Pond. I refuse to call it a pond, man. That's an ocean.
It's just a really big
That's-
pond.
That's just disrespecting the ocean now.
I always wonder where that line came from, but I always liked it so much that I just use it. Across the pond.
All right. Well, thanks for listening to the show. Thanks to you again to Michael Bridgewater. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you. You take care of yourselves.
You too. My name's Rob Nichols.
Frank. And I'm Purnell.
Have a good night and have a safe week. Take care of each other.
And remember, retro gaming doesn't have to be limited to Namco Museum releases. You can actually go out and play quite a few retro games that you've never heard of up until an episode of the show, or you just stumbled across a link on the internet, or someone used a track from the game in their fan Sonic collection. There's a variety of ways to come across new music that ties to games you've never played, and just because it's not a hot new release doesn't mean you can't take the time to learn, because you never know. You may find yourself saving some money and playing games that you never expected to like more than games that you're being funneled in to buy on a schedule.
Swedgewell.
Oh, and one more thing. So I want to add one more. This is an odd thing for me to do, but I did two. Don't be ashamed of the person that you are. Be open and honest with yourself, to yourself, and to others. But with that said, do not be afraid or ashamed to look within yourself for the opportunity to learn and grow, because we can always do that, and it is not shameful to realize you've done something that you regret and to grow from that. That's not shameful. If anything, being stubborn, that's a shame.
Purnell, I'm the one who broke your TurboGrafx 16.
What?
I knew it.
I have so many sad stories regarding that TurboGrafx.